My name is Art Pieter de Man. I'm a professor here at the VU University in Amsterdam, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to discuss new business models in horticulture. And this is part of a longer research project that we've been doing called the DAVINC3I project, in which I collaborated with the universities of Wageningen and Eindhoven in studying how the future virtual logistic networks may look like in horticulture. And as part of that study, we've looked at the type of ICT requirements the horticulture industry will have in the future, the type of logistic systems, but also, and that was part of my research, new business models. What are new ways of making money in the horticulture industry? And our project overall was concerned with a number of questions. You can see them here on the slide. We've dealt with multimodal transport. We've looked at logistic networks. Where should value-added logistics be located? But my part specifically was about business models, the financial side of the horticulture industry. And as part of those business models, my thesis will be that in order to create new business models, the horticultural industry really need to improve its collaboration skills. And what I'd like to do now in this short half hour is just guide you a little bit through business model thinking, and then show you 4 different scenarios for future business models in horticulture. And we developed those scenarios together with a big group of companies. We've had dozens of companies involved in our DAVINC3I project. And together with them, we sketched on future scenarios. And I worked them out. I would like to show them to you and hope that it will inspire you also to create some new business models yourself. First of all, my field of interest really is the strategy of firms. And so I've studied a lot of different industries. And if I look at the horticulture industry, there are some very specific points about its business model. The first is there are many small companies, many small enterprises, both in the horticulture itself, the growing of flowers and plants, but also in trading. The florists, for example, are a lot of small companies. And that already is very specific for this industry. And I think the downside of it is that the internationalization in the industry, especially for local production, hasn't gone as far as in other industries. But the upside is that there's a lot of entrepreneurship, there are a lot of experiments with new and innovative ideas. The second characteristic is that the collaboration in the industry is mainly operational. I know that there are a lot of people who think that the collaboration in horticulture is really good. Well, I beg to differ. I would like to have that discussion with you. I think on an operational level, it flows very well. The logistic systems work well. Companies collaborate in terms of trading with each other. But the focus is very much on day trade. And really new business development, bringing new products to market, having a strategy on the level of the entire supply chain, that actually is, I think, a weak spot of the industry compared to other industries. And finally, and that's the most amazing one to me, is that the producers of flowers and plants really don't know their client. There's a huge gap between the production and the demand side. And that's why the industry is still very much supply-driven instead of demand-driven. And if we're going to look at new business models, I think that's where the opportunities will be. Become more demand-driven, improve collaboration on a strategic level, and look also at internationalization of production. Just a very brief theoretical background on business models. I'll be short on this slide. A business model describes the way companies create value, the way they earn value, and it also shows what are the activities and resources that organizations need. Now, for the horticulture industry, I think it is very important to think in terms of the creation of value, the appropriation of value, and the production of value on a chain level. the success of the individual company really depends on the success of the complete supply chain, from grower to the florist. And that is very important, because the success of each individual company only partly depends on what it does itself. It depends to a large extent also on what other organizations in the entire chain do. Now, if we look at the collaboration across the supply chain, of course that's quite difficult. It's easy to collaborate internally in your organization because you have all the information, all the knowledge is there, all the financial information is there, and in case there is a conflict, when somebody doesn't want to work with an innovative business model, then the boss can just decide and say, okay, but we are going to do it. If you want to work on a chain level with other partners, all those conditions are not met. You have only part of the information in the industry. You don't know exactly all the costs and revenues of other organizations in the chain. And you cannot force organizations to work in a new business model. So therefore, it's often difficult in, I think, the horticulture industry to create these new business models in collaboration with other organizations. Why should we look at new business models? Well, because old business models, they run out of their life cycle. They get at the end of their life cycle. And on this slide, I've put 3 questions that indicate that you need to renew your business model. And the first question is, can you think of still radical improvements in your existing business models? Or has all improvement become incremental? Is it only small steps? So if you have a business model where the room for improvement is 1%, maybe maximum 5% per year, then that business model is very mature and it's probably at the end of its life cycle. If you can think of still huge gains, say, okay, we can still do 20% of revenue growth or 20% of cost savings, then you can still develop your existing business model further. And that business model may be around for a couple of more years. The second indicator that your business model may be out of date is when clients start to opt for other business models, when they start leaving. So if you're a florist and at once you see that your clients are going to the supermarket down the street, probably your business model is obsolete. So when clients start leaving, you need to think, is this business model still a good one for the future? And the final one, of course, very clear, are your margins still okay or are they declining? Do you see margin growth or stable margins? Or do you see that your margins are getting squeezed by competitors, suppliers, or clients? And if that happens, your business model may be at the end of its life cycle. So when all these 3 things, the client, the margin, incremental improvement, hold for your organization, you really have to rethink whether you need to come up with a new business model. Now, we created some scenarios for the future of the horticulture. And those are really scenarios, so they're somewhat theoretical exercises, but we already saw that there are some companies that work according to these scenarios. And I would just like to go through all 4 of them just to give you an idea and get you a bit inspired about what you could do. And the first new business model is disintermediation, meaning that existing parts of the chain, like wholesale and maybe also the auction, will actually lose a lot of ground because new players come up or because organizations go around the auction or wholesalers. And this may happen in the case of, for example, buying on distance here in the Netherlands, COA, where we can see that virtual trading platforms are actually substituting the existing players, the wholesalers, and also, to some extent, the auction. And retailers and florists may buy directly via the virtual platform from the producers or the growers of plants and flowers. And obviously, in that case, there will be a cost saving because each part of the chain also needs its own margin. So that could lead to lower costs and prices. So examples that we had was COA, buying on distance. One of my students has done research on that. That can be really a threat to wholesalers, but we also found that wholesalers who deliver more value added actually are not hurt that much by retailers or florists buying via a virtual platform. If you want to operate in this scenario as a wholesaler, you need to think about value-added services. Can I give advice to florists? Can I take care of more of the logistics? Are there other things that I can do to make it valuable for them to stay on as my client? The interesting thing of such a virtual platform in which everybody trades is that it will open up a lot of new different ideas for business models. Because think of all the data that such a virtual platform will have. There's a lot you can do with that data in optimizing, in coordinating across the supply chain, in finding new specific niches to serve that may be very profitable. And I think that's also one of the core things in one of the other scenarios. Try to look more at all the data and information that there is in the industry, and that may create a lot of room for new business models. We also see that in the second model, which is re-intermediation. So instead of moving around all kinds of existing parties, we may see the emergence of new parties that improve the entire supply chain. An example, we called it a Flora provider, which is an organization, in this case, working for supermarkets. And it does the entire flower and plants category for supermarkets. Nowadays, if you go to a supermarket, then the flowers often, they're standing there, but who's really buying them? I mean, it doesn't look attractive. The people aren't knowledgeable. The type of flowers that are there often do not fit with the people that visit that specific supermarket. And therefore, the supermarket also has a lot of waste. They throw away a lot of flowers. There may be much more demand for flowers than they actually know, but they're not really investing in it. You know, it's a category in the supermarket that sometimes I think they'd rather get rid of it instead of making a nice business out of it. Now, a Flora provider may actually improve that situation. And we already found one company here in the Netherlands that does that, and that's RoseLife. And what RoseLife does is they work with a supermarket, and they get all the point of sales data that shows what type of flowers are sold on what day in what month of the year. And based on the data they gather, they give advice to the supermarket, and the more data they get, the more specific they can be. They can say, okay, if you have a supermarket in the south of Amsterdam, then on Saturday in May, you should have mainly white roses, because that's what sells at that location at that point of time. But maybe in a completely other city in the south of the country, they want red or yellow narcissus or what have you, other types of flowers. So you can really go to the zip code level and say, okay, supermarket, if you want to make the best revenue from flowers, then in this specific supermarket, you should sell these flowers on this date. And in doing so, they've already shown that they're able to get rid of a lot of waste. For example, it's easy to find out that on Monday, nobody buys flowers. So why would you have flowers in the supermarket on Monday? So just reduce the number of flowers that you offer in the early days of the week and increase the number later in the week. That's already a first cost saving. The supermarket doesn't have to throw away that much. But there's also revenue increase. Because you have more specific and better flowers on the right time, people will buy more and will also buy at a higher price. Now, in order to make this system work, RoseLife has to be sure that they can deliver the right plants and flowers in the supermarket at the right time. So instead of having the day trade, they actually enter into long-term relationships with growers who can deliver a broad assortment of plants and flowers. And that means that in the course of time, Rose Life can let the growers know, okay, in May, on that specific Saturday, we need to have mainly white roses, or we need to have narcissus in April, or what have you. So you can start to plan production, and they can actually match supply and demand. And that's a big step forward over what is happening nowadays, where supply and demand are only met by chance. So here you see an example of collaboration that's necessary. Long-term relationship with the growers, long-term relationship with the supermarket, and in between is a flora provider who provides advice, who gathers knowledge, who gathers information to get the right assortment of flowers at the right time in the right supermarket. Completely new business model that can be very profitable. A third model, perhaps a bit more difficult to operate, is forward integration. And this is when growers start selling flowers directly to the final consumer. And the benefits are easy to see, the costs are also easy to see. The benefit is you're directly in touch with the consumer, you bypass wholesalers, the auction, etc. But it delivers another problem, and that's how are you going to deal with the logistics? And that can be very expensive if you have to bring it to every single consumer's home. So you need to come up with new models to do those logistics parts of in the supply chain. And that's actually what my other colleagues in the research project we're doing are looking at. They're looking at the logistics, the information you need for that, and what are the good models to achieve that. Obviously, another problem is that one grower will only sell one type of flower, and consumers may want to have a diversity. So instead of one grower having his own website, you will probably see groups of growers or cooperatives of growers that collaborate in order to operate their own website. The logistic problem, to solve that is difficult. Actually, it's also difficult in the previous scenario. I forgot to mention that, but also in this scenario, the current flora provider, Rose Life, doesn't do the logistics. It still collaborates with the auction and parties around that to make sure that all flowers get to the right place in the right time. So for the auction, there's still a role in this new business model, but it's not so much in trading anymore as it is as a service provider to Rose Life. And the same could happen with this forward integration model. You have a really short supply chain. We already have seen some examples. I've put them on the slide, some .coms that are already kind of moving towards this model, selling flowers and plants online. This is also maybe difficult for some consumers. Flowers and plants are an emotional product. If you see a picture on a website, you're not sure whether you get exactly that color and the quality that you would like to have. So you have to wait and see what it looks like when it ends up on your doorstep. But we also see that there's a segment of people who are interested in that. And perhaps that segment will be growing when people get more and more used to such models, buying plants and flowers online. It's also an issue of educating the consumer and having some good experiences with consumers. Obviously, with a couple of wrong experiences that a flower derives half that at your home, this business model will fold immediately. The final scenario we're looking at is an internationalization scenario. And it's a more difficult scenario perhaps, but it is, I think, an interesting one. And basically the scenario says, okay, there are these great cooperatives of growers of plants and flowers. They have their own regulations, their own quality systems. Why not franchise that to producers abroad and create local for local clusters? So why not set up in the region of Paris or Munich or what have you, some franchise companies that also produce these flowers and plants and deliver it to the local market. I think there's a lot of elements already in place in many of the growers cooperatives that we have, like a brand, like quality systems, like a clear focus on the market, business models they have in place, and they will be very interesting for foreign growers as well. Obviously, that wouldn't work in all markets. In some markets, such a system will just be too expensive, but there are markets, certainly in Western Europe, where I think there is room for doing this and for franchising the Dutch concept to local growers abroad. And in that way, the internationalization, I think, can really take off. It will mean a fundamental rethink as a grower of your business. Okay, you're still growing plants and flowers, but you're also making money on the knowledge that you've gained in doing so by franchising your concept and your knowledge. We haven't really seen examples of that. There are of course, individual growers who move abroad, but a complete franchise system, we haven't seen that yet. It's not yet in place. It will mean that if it works, that the Netherlands can become the R&D center of the flower and plant industry, where all the new concepts are developed, are tested and in the market, and then over time, via the franchises, you can also deliver them in France or Germany or the UK or wherever. I think it certainly is an interesting model. It will not be something that will be done in just 5 years. It will take very long to set this up. At the same time, it doesn't have to be perfect right away. Even with a small franchise formula, you can, I think, do a lot in a number of countries where the market for flowers and plants isn't as mature as it is in the Netherlands. Here in the Netherlands, we operate at a very high level with a very demanding clients. In other countries, it's less, so you don't have to deliver the complete perfection that we have in the Netherlands at the moment in other countries. You can build that up slowly over time. Again, in this scenario, as in the other scenarios, you see that collaboration between organizations is very important. It's not just the growers that have to franchise. It may also mean that wholesalers, traders, perhaps some suppliers are also going to make that step to the international market. And that, of course, is also something that takes time, but it is necessary to do if you want to make this franchise formula a success. So collaboration, again, very important in this fourth and final scenario. So a final part of the research we've been doing is delving into collaboration and see what the success factors of collaboration are. And I would love to discuss all the cases that we've looked at, but what I've tried to do is just give a list of about the 10 commandments for collaboration. And we see that in the collaborations in horticulture that are successful, they really meet these criteria, whereas in the not so successful ones, we see that some things are lacking. And some of them are very simple, have a clear goal. You always say, okay, yeah, logically, we need to have a clear goal when we collaborate. But still, a lot of the collaborations that fail, that we researched, if we asked, okay, what's your goal? Then the different partners would have completely different stories about what the goal was. So it's easier said than done, apparently. The second one is make those goals measurable. So what is the amount of cost saving that you want to have? Or how many shops do you want to deliver? Or how much do you want to invest in building a brand? Make it measurable. Start simple. Sometimes the ideas for collaboration are, okay, we're going to conquer the world in 2 years. It's not going to happen. Start with something simple, get to know each other, and from then on, intensify your collaboration and build it over time. It doesn't have to be perfect at the outset, but you have to strive towards perfection over time. Make capacity available. It costs time and it costs money, and time often is, of course, the biggest thing, specifically if you work with small and medium-sized enterprises. You're very, very busy, you've got a lot on your plate, and then also make time available for collaboration may be difficult. If you don't have the time, then just don't do it, because you need to be involved. What else did we have? Oh yeah, the soft side, build on the soft side, build trust, build commitment, get to know each other. Also on small companies, there are cultural and personal differences between the people who need to collaborate. And it is good to be aware of that and to get to know each other, and also to behave in a nice way when you collaborate. So be proactive towards your partner. Communicate directly, it's another one that's on the list a bit down. Have direct communication. Communication via email kills all collaboration. If you have a question for your partner, just pick up the phone. Long-term vision. Before a collaboration pays off, it will take you a year, it may take you 2 years. And some people think that they can get the cost saving or the revenues from day one. It's not going to happen. It takes time. So you need to have a bit more of a long-term vision. And ensuring a good governance structure. How are you going to decide about issues? Most of the collaborations that failed in horticulture failed because of this issue. That they didn't have a clear mechanism for decision making. And sometimes you want to change something in your processes or in your market orientation or in your, the products that you grow. And then you need to agree on that together. So be clear about that. How are you going to decide when big issues are going to come up? Also agree beforehand on the financial model behind the collaboration. I've had some students working on that. You can find it, by the way, later this year, all on the DAVINC3I website. Very clear financial model up front, saves a lot of trouble later. And the final point is, be prepared that each collaboration is going to change. You make an agreement today, but you can be very sure that next year that agreement is not valid anymore because the market has changed, or technology has changed, or the people have changed inside the organization. So also ensure that you keep renewing that collaboration that is necessary to make your business model work. Now, these were just some highlights of the research we've done in the DAVINC3I project. If you want to have more information, you can check out the website. You can contact me or Robert over here. More and more results are going to be available on our website. And on February 19th, we have a big conference where we will share all these results in much more detail with you. I only had half an hour today to discuss all those business models. There's so much more to tell, but I hope I've given you a nice appetizer and that you will come the 19th of February to our big ending conference, because I think there will be a lot of valuable lessons. I do think that also because we worked with companies, this was not a theoretical project, we actually worked with companies on implementing these ideas, that we have a lot of valuable and practical lessons that we can contribute to the horticulture sector. Thank you so much.